In this presentation, I am going to talk about the digital divide that exists worldwide and the effect it has on the literacy and the opportunities of the people who are on the less fortunate side of the divide. To begin, I would like to bring to your attention the statistic that the world's population is estimated to be 7.2 billion, and 20% of that population is said to be without electricity. That means that roughly 1.4 billion people in the world live without the common affordances that technology allows each and every day. Now, this is not the sole reason for why some groups of people are able to prosper from the benefits of technology while others do not. It is, however, a good indication of the size of the divide that exists worldwide. The divide is something that affects people in just about every country, and to help put things into perspective, an examination of the current situations in the United States, India, and much of the continent of Africa serve to prove just that. To best grasp an understanding of the digital divide, a good starting point would be to examine the divide and its causes here in the United States. There are three factors that can be attributed to the divide, and they are the economic income of households, the geographical location of citizens, and race. The first factor can be summed up by the observation that American families with a higher source of income experience a more facilitated access to technology than families who earn a lower income. To see how this can have an impact on the literacy rate and opportunities of American citizens, let us focus on the promising future contributors to society, the children of these family units. Take a child from a middle-class family that lives comfortably and is likely to have a computer in the household. It is reasonable to say that it is available for use at their convenience. When it comes to school-related materials, the computer is a perfect resource because it can facilitate the completion of homework assignments, communication with teachers, the dissemination of learning materials, and the access to the information-abundant world that is the internet. Now, consider a child from a lower-class family that resides in an urban neighborhood where the income levels of households are likely to be on the lower extremity of the pay scale. A computer at home is not something that can be readily available to the child. More than often, the local library or school is the only place where they are able to access a computer. Imagine what this means for the child when they have an assignment or task to complete via a computer. The only choice the child may have is to use a friend's computer or one that is provided at a local library. Even then, the time the computer can be used is limited because there are likely to be many more people waiting to use the same resource. When considering these two cases, it is easy to see which of the children will be at a disadvantage. If extrapolated to American society as a whole, it is plain to see that it can have a serious impact on the literacy and opportunities. People who experience middle-class status have an overall better disposition to employment opportunities and achieve a higher sense of literacy than lower-class counterparts. The second factor to the divide in America can be attributed to geographical differences in the location of citizens. The cost of providing internet services increases the more scattered the distribution of customers is. In rural areas, when internet access is finally implemented, it is usually cable modem, not the blazing fast speeds that most broadband users experience. Cable modem is usually the only choice in rural areas because the cost of rolling out faster speed networks is higher and it hasn't been realized yet. With these forces in place, one cannot help but acknowledge that rural regions are at a disadvantage and are missing out on opportunities to maybe bring produce and products that are usually sold exclusively in the community to a bigger e-commerce platform, and possibly bring prosperity to their regions and the nation as a whole. The literacy rate of these regions also suffers from these forces, further giving evidence of the digital divide. The third and most ethically challenging factor of the digital divide in the States is race. There are people who feel as though the digital divide has been manifested into a new front to battle for the civil rights that African Americans fought for so earnestly in the 1960s. According to a study conducted by the Commerce Department in 1999, ownership of computers is most prominent with white Americans than it is with black Americans. For advocates of civil rights, it seems to drive the elitist view that whites are subject to more opportunities than blacks. But this is where the lines of ethics need to be evaluated. The study, where most of the information that supports the claim is slightly flawed, in that it focuses on computers owned in a household and fails to really acknowledge the computers that are accessible in schools and the workplace, which is where most people actually use computers. The Commerce Department study also notes that two-parent families of all ethnic groups are twice as likely to have internet access as single-parent families, which further detests the claim that whites experience a greater use of technology, but this is rarely quoted with as much frequency. To make the argument that the digital divide is race-driven is not entirely true. Poverty, geographical location, and crime rates play a far more influential role in widening the digital divide than what race is made out to be. Another examination that serves to help better understand the worldwide digital divide is the situation that is found in India. India has made considerable strides in developing the IT infrastructure it needs to be a contender in terms of global competitiveness. The problem lies in the fact that this infrastructure is first rolled out in major cities and metropolitan areas, while more rural areas lag behind. Most of India's population resides in the more rural areas, so the digital divide within India still exists. To begin to bridge the digital divide in India, the most fundamental resource has to be realized, and that is electricity. The traditional way of large companies forming one big power grid becomes a complex operation, and it is further hampered by what they stand to gain economically from servicing isolated regions. To provide electricity to more rural areas, it has to be the job of smaller organizations. One such organization is called Husk Power Systems. Husk Power Systems has a unique solution to providing electricity, and that is to use the byproduct of rice harvesting, rice husk, to fuel small power plants. Among the benefits that power plants bring to these regions are the opportunity for rural markets to be brought to e-commerce, the ability of new businesses and shops to operate far past the hours of sunset, the creation of new jobs running the power plants, and the ability for people to conduct activities that they would not have been able to before unless by candlelight. The literacy of the region can also be said to improve dramatically, as electricity affords them the opportunity to achieve internet connectivity and access information that they were not able to before, further bridging the digital divide. The last examination, and the one that gives the perspective of the more extreme side of the worldwide divide, is the situation that is present in much of the continent of Africa. Even though there are countries that have the necessary resources to sustain a technological infrastructure, their governments are characterized by corrupt practices that prevent the realization of technological connectivity. Almost all of Africa's 54 economies are characterized by mismanagement of funds and the governments failing to fulfill their obligations to its citizens. Healthcare, education, adequate shelter, and food are out of reach for much of the population. To have internet connectivity be a priority in a region that has yet to even realize clean running water for its people seems unethical. These circumstances combined weigh down the possibility of bridging the digital divide, even if there are people that can afford a reasonable internet connection. And now for the ethical analysis. Under the ideals of consequentialist ethics, to be ethical means to bring about the greatest benefit and the least harm to the greatest amount of people. It is not just to have one group of people able to experience a favorable advantage over another when the factors responsible for the advantage are ultimately out of their control. In the United States, many may argue that the same barriers that exist between whites and blacks in everyday life are manifested in the digital divide. That is simply not entirely true. The digital divide has become another area for modern-day civil rights activists to try and further advance the agenda of the civil rights movement. To try and bridge the digital divide between whites and blacks would in theory bring about a greater benefit to a greater amount of people, but the underlying truth is that the real benefit would be for black Americans to gain equality to white Americans in another area. Bridging the divide would just be a byproduct of that. Bridging the digital divide should be a world effort. Individual countries should not just focus on bridging the digital divide on their own soil. The situations in India and Africa face the same ethical dilemmas, but they are exemplified in more extreme forms than what is found in the United States. In order to be contributors in today's society, people need to have a grasp of current technologies and access to the internet available at their discretion. The world today is ever more connected, and it is pretty much necessary for everyone to be able to subscribe to that connectivity.